Welcome to Wines We Drink, a podcast for wine lovers and learners. I'm Charlotte Norsworthy, and together with my counterpart Keith Herndon, we'll be exploring a new wine each week. Keith is a lover of wine, and I am a learner of wine, and we hope you'll continue learning and sipping along with us.
Welcome, everyone, to the midpoint of the second season of Wines We Drink podcast. I'm Charlotte Norsworthy, and with me again this week, as always, is co-host and certified wine sommelier Keith Herndon.
Hello, Charlotte. Man, it's hard to believe that we've already made it to the midpoint of the season. Episode 6 is today.
That is crazy. The summer is flying by, and the 4th of July is behind us. The heat has settled in.
Yeah, the 4th of July celebration is behind us, but we're still in the 4th of July week, and I'm still in that celebratory mood.
That's great to hear, because me too. Our loyal listeners will recall from last year that we celebrated the midpoint of the season with some bubbly. So we're going to do that again this year. We're popping the cork on a wonderful sparkling wine this week. And if you want to check out last season's sparkling wine selection or any of the other episodes from last season, or this season, you can find us wherever you listen to your podcasts. And also, you'll check out our episode guide at wineswedrink.com. Subtle plug there.
Yeah. Charlotte, we're going to do something a little different today with our selection. Usually I'm opening a bottle of wine that you've never tasted before, and we discuss your reactions as a first-time drinker of that wine. But today, however, you'll be drinking a sparkling wine you've had many times as a guest in our wine kitchen.
Aha! I now understand where this is headed. Listeners, this is going to be fabulous, and for once, I am a seasoned veteran on the wine in this episode.
Yes, today we're uncorking my personal favorite Napa Valley sparkling wine. It's called Solstice, and it's made by the Merryvale Winery in St. Helena. If there's a sparkling wine that I would call my house sparkler, this one is it.
That's a great phrase, the sparkler, especially for July 4th. Yeah, I mean, everyone, I've had this wine at many of Keith's celebrations. It's amazingly delicious. But Keith, at your parties, we've never taken the time to actually step back, actually discuss why you like the Solstice so much. So I'm really curious and looking forward not only to drinking more of it today, but talking about it.
Charlotte, that's excellent. But before we pop the cork in a few minutes, allow me to give our audience some background. First, this wine is made in the traditional champagne method, which means the bubbles are created through a secondary fermentation process that takes place inside the bottle. For our wine beginners, it's important to note that although the wine is made in the traditional champagne style, we call it sparkling wine and not champagne, because the name champagne is reserved for only those sparkling wines produced in the Champagne region of France. Of course, there's lots of delicious champagnes on the market, but today we're highlighting this American sparkling wine from the Napa Valley.
Yeah, I mean, I finally learned, everyone, that the mantra that all champagnes are sparkling wines, but not all sparkling wines are champagne.
Yeah, that's a good mantra to keep in mind as you learn about sparkling wine, right? Today's bottle of Solstice that we're drinking is a non-vintage release, and it was made from a blend of Pinot Noir and Chardonnay that was harvested over many years. It's a blend of grapes that were harvested in 2013, 2014, 2015, and 2016. Specifically, the mix is 54% Pinot Noir and 46% Chardonnay.
Wow, what a scientific balance we have going on here. And so with this being technically a non-vintage wine, does the combination of all of these vintages tell us anything about how the wine should taste?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. The winemaker's notes about this addresses it specifically. Jeff Crawford is the winemaker. He's also the winemaker at Merryvale's sister label, Starmont Wines. But he said that he used the older vintages to add some complexity to the newer vintages, which were more fruit forward. So, you've had this wine before, but when you taste it again, I think you'll agree that he got it right. There is fruit, but there's also this complexity, and it really becomes this well-balanced blend. It's a really nice featuring of the fruit and the complexity, and you get that sense that he knew what he was doing when he combined this Chardonnay and this Pinot Noir and this mixture that he created.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to tasting this again with fresh taste buds. And so, can we pour us a couple of glasses?
Absolutely.
Let's do it.
Yes, and for our listeners, please know that I'm opening this bottle into a hand towel. We don't want sparkling wine corks flying everywhere, so safety first, okay?
Okay.
Whoa! Yay! Always good to have that little sound of the sparkling wine.
No,
right?
That's great. The pop is amazing.
So
now let's see the bubbles in the glass. I love the little it's not smoke, but smoke-like vapors coming out right after you pop. That's always super fun.
Yes.
You can hear the fizz, I'm sure.
The little foam is referred to as mousse.
Mousse. I love that. I also eat mousse when I celebrate. I drink bubbly when I celebrate, so it only makes sense. You're pouring it, and as the mousse is dissipating, you can really see the sort of golden color of this beautiful bubbly and the big bubbles that are forming on the inside of the glass. It just really looks like there's a party going on in there.
Yes, I think the color of this particular sparkling wine is exquisite. It just looks classy in the glass, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So with sparkling wine, though, I want to remind everyone that before you taste that, and before you smell it, you don't actually swirl sparkling wine. You swirl still wine because you want to get that wine, that alcohol, and those aromas released, right? But the bubbles in sparkling wine are already releasing the aromatics. So swirling it will overdo it.
Oh.
And it would lead to a sense of flatness
Okay.
in the wine. So without swirling this sparkling wine, go ahead and smell the wine for me and let me know what aromas come to mind.
The layman's wine. No swirling required. Wow. Yeah. Again, keeping in theme with the white wines that we've had up until the halfway point here this season, I'm getting some lemony citrus. I think that's more subdued than when I think of it against those other bright white wines that we've been tasting this season.
Yes, I think that was part of the stylistic decision of the winemaker. He wanted to dial back that citrus freshness, that would come from the Chardonnay by blending it with that Pinot Noir. The Pinot Noir brings forward some of the notes of tree fruits like apple and other red fruits like strawberry, right?
Yeah.
So taste that first sip and see is it like you recall from the last time that you had this wine?
I know, I'm trying to reflect on memory here. I'll also say from smell, it's like there's a sort of butteriness to it that feels very distinct.
Cool.
But yeah, let's go in for that sip. Oh, yes. It is as every bit as good as I remember. I think my senses, though, are on higher alert. Probably since we're recording. So that being said, I'm going to go in for a second. Yeah. I've always loved the sort of berry, strawberry undertones that you get with this wine. And there's also just the sort of tartness that isn't coming from acidity. It would be more so like a tart cherry, it's sort of hitting me square on the tongue.
Sure, those are some great observations, Charlotte. When I drink this wine, I revel in the balance it has between the Chardonnay and the Pinot Noir grapes. There's a crispness and a fruitiness with every sip.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we don't want to give our listeners a false sense of what we mean by the fruitiness in this wine. I mean, those flavors are certainly there, don't get me wrong, but they are more subtle, I would say, and there's a complex flavor I'm getting. But as always, I can't quite describe it just yet.
I think I know what you're sensing there, that complex flavor, it's like you've had this wine before, but like you said earlier that we really haven't talked about it a lot. I think what you're sensing is this. The winemaker made another really important stylistic decision when he was creating this wine. He allowed it to age in the bottle for 24 months, which when you look at the tasting notes, he explained that that's 9 months longer than is required under the rules for a non-vintage champagne. So by extending that contact that the juice had with the yeast, the cells were left, from that secondary fermentation. It resulted in what I refer to, and what I think what he referred to is this bread-like flavor, right? He calls it a, quote, thick crusted baguette, unquote.
Oh, wow. Yes, that sounds amazing. I wasn't quite there yet in terms of that articulation, but that hearing the description makes sense because, I was mentioning earlier that there's like a sort of buttery smell to it, and I probably just attribute that straight to the bread.
Yeah, I think I think we can think of this wine now as a little baguette, with some hints of lemon ginger marmalade and a smear of strawberry jam. Oof. Right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, we might be getting a little carried away with our wine descriptions, but it certainly isn't like a sweet marmalade or jam, but there's some essence there.
Charlotte. Yes, you are correct about that. It is a very dry wine. In sparkling wine terms, we call that brut, B-R-U-T. But this is one of those sparkling wines I love so much, it's really easy for me to get carried away by it. I'm extremely fond, as you know, of the wines from the Merryvale Vineyards. And this one is sourced exclusively from the Stanley Ranch Estate Vineyard, which is on the Napa Valley side of the Canaris area in the southern part of the valley. I've seen this vineyard and its gentle slopes and the great orientation to the sun, makes it a quintessential area for Napa Valley grapes.
Yeah, I mean, you hit it spot on with the fandom for Merryvale. I mean, my glass right now is probably sitting on a Merryvale coaster. But we've been seeing and featuring exceptional wines all season, and they're at some great prices. So how much can our listeners expect to pay for a bottle of this specialty Solstice?
So far this season, we've been emphasizing wines that have been coming in under $30 per bottle. But as a caveat, I mentioned at the very beginning of the season, we knew we were going to be splurging a bit on a couple of bottles this season, and this is one of them, right? When we recorded this episode, you could order Solstice online directly from the Merryvale Vineyard at around $48 a bottle. Which I still think that represents a good price point for this quality in a Napa Valley sparkling wine. That price point is in line with very similar selections from other wineries known for their sparkling wines, such as Schramsberg and Domaine Canaris.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you think about a sparkling wine, you think about special occasions. This isn't an everyday sort of wine. And so I think that's still totally reasonable. I mean, every time I've had Solstice, it's been in the context of celebration. So when you're thinking about it through that lens, I think the price point just makes total sense, even for working for some of our audience. So it's an indulgent splurge on a delicious sparkling wine for when you're celebrating.
I think that's the best perspective to have. Sometimes the wine world asks us to indulge a little, and this is a great sparkler to indulge the next time you're celebrating a milestone, which is maybe a significant birthday or an anniversary, perhaps.
Yeah. Absolutely. I will probably be featuring this at my next great milestone. So thanks, Keith. We're going to take a short break really quick, and when we return, it will be time for our pairing period. Keith's going to give us some suggestions for how to celebrate with Solstice. Welcome back to today's show. We've reached the midpoint in season 2, so we've been celebrating this milestone with the exceptional Solstice sparkling wine from Napa's Merryvale Winery. We're now in the pairing period portion of the show, and Keith has prepared some ideas for how to serve this sparkler at your next party.
Before I get into the foods that work well with this line, I'd like to briefly address a question that I'm often asked when the subject turns to serving sparkling wine. Flute, coupe, or glass?
Ah, yes. By all means, let's hear your thoughts on this sparkling wine puzzle. Flute, coupe, the shallower glass, or just a regular glass?
So, like a lot of things in wine, the answer defaults to it depends.
Oh, God.
The folks at Wine Folly suggest keeping a few things in mind when selecting your glass. A flute, which is a tall, elongated glass, keeps the bubbles tight in the glass and less escape. So that is most suited to the very dry sparkling wines, the brutes of the world. A coupe, which is the shallow bowl with a wide drinking surface, lets a lot of the bubbles escape, right? So that allows for a softer taste, and it is most suited for sweet sparkling wines. As for glasses, there are two main types for sparkling wine. One is known as a tulip, right, which sort of has an oval bowl that angles quickly to a narrow opening. The other is called the wide tulip, which looks more like a typical white wine glass. Both of these shapes are designed to collect the aromas and send them to your nose in an ideal way. So think tulip for rosé sparklers and perhaps an Italian Prosecco. And have some wide tulips on hand for a deeply complex vintage champagne. Okay? So that was a long-winded answer to say that I think a flute works very well for our dry solstice. And I didn't mention it earlier because I wanted to address it here in the pairing period, but we're drinking our solstice today out of some very nice Italian glass flutes that I found on clearance at a local shop,
Nice.
right? They look great, but they were not expensive at all.
Oh yeah, no, they do look elegant, but here we're balling on a budget. So, and also speaking of serving it, what do you have for me to pair with the flute?
Right. So, my go-to cheese pairing with a dry sparkling white wine is a simple white cheddar, right? The rich complexity that you get with cheddar, it comes alive with the breadiness undertones that we talked about with this wine, right? And one of my favorite party snacks is popcorn, right? And yes, I think popcorn is a wonderful complement to a sparkling wine. So together, they make a perfect party pairing for this wine, right? So during the break, I place some white cheddar dusted popcorn in a bowl. So please take some and try it with this sparkling wine.
Oh, I love the idea of popping the corn and popping the cork for
Absolutely.
the wine. I'm going to grab some popcorn here. Oh, man. Oh, wow. The cheese and the salt from the popcorn and the corn itself, is bringing out that bright acidity in the sparkling wine. I was surprised because the mouthfeel is not what you'd expect at first. The cheddar popcorn and sparkling wine is not a combo I can say that I've had before, but it's great. What a great party idea.
Yes, it's certainly not a pretentious pairing at all, but I think it's a very delicious one.
Yeah,
right?
I totally agree. I mean, if you're being more ambitious than just some party snacks, I will say I'm very content with the popcorn choice. But, let's say you wanted to amp it up a little bit. Is there other foods that you'd recommend to pair with this wine?
Shellfish comes to mind immediately. And I'm going to defer to the winery itself on the specifics, right? They often host summer solstice parties at their winery where they feature oysters.
Oh.
Both raw and barbecued, and they pair it with this wine. So I've been to Merryvale many times, but I haven't made it to their solstice party yet. It's on my bucket list.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it sounds like I also need to add this trip to another one of my lists. So, thank you for these pairing tips today. I'm not sure how many of us would have thought of cheddar popcorn and oysters as equal pairings for this type of wine.
Right. Well, I'm happy to be of service here, right?
Truly 4th of July-esque pairings for this wine. So, before we go today, can you give us and our listeners a hint for our wine selection next week?
Yeah, I love following up a party wine like Solstice with another wine suitable for a party. So we're going to be staying in California, but we're headed to Napa's neighbor, Sonoma Valley, and we're going to be in its gorgeous Russian River Valley. We're going to be drinking a nice rosé made by one of the area's premier wineries. Charlotte, you're going to be in for a treat with this wine next week.
Oh man, I mean, isn't every week a treat on this show? There's so much great wine. So I'm super excited and I can't wait for this rosé. So until next week.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Thanks for listening to Wines We Drink. Listen to our other episodes anywhere you get your podcasts. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @WinesWeDrink and on Instagram @TheWinesWeDrink. Cheers.